In this video, I'll explore my method of creating new patterns for Pattern Point. This is the one pattern that Bill Looms included, and that is butterfly, and that turned out pretty well. And the pattern that's in the program that produces that butterfly looks like this. So how do you get from this to this? And that's what I hope to illustrate for you in this video. In the previous program about offset patterns, I mentioned that I had created some other patterns. For example, this is blue butterfly. I had created a shamrock. I'll render that so you can see. And that turned out fairly well for a shamrock. And I'd created a simple heart, and that turned out pretty well. And it took me a long time to visualize just how I could solve this problem. With only the one example to go by, I had to try to understand just what it was that was being done when you have a pattern like butterfly. Let me find it again. Blue butterfly. What does this all mean? And how does that translate into a pattern like butterfly? Let me just get that back so these correspond. What do those lines, how does that work? So my initial visualization was the edge of a spoon dipping into a container of sugar or starch and going to different depths while that container was turning. And as a result, I realized that this line is actually the outside of the cutting edge as it's dipping into the wood. And that gives you the depth of each cut. And having it symmetrical like this is the midpoint, and you make it symmetrical with mirror, allows you to experiment with symmetrical patterns and just doing your design up until the halfway point. And with that, I finally decided on how to make a device to reproduce these lines. In a previous video, I showed cutting butterfly onto the end of a piece of poplar dowel. So this is the little device I came up with, and I've been able to successfully transcribe simple patterns that seem suitable for cutting with a fly cutter. So this consists of a few different parts. This is a simple gerbil compatible board with two stepper drivers on there, and they're of sufficient size to run a couple of little NEMA 17 motors. One drives the plate with the pattern that I want to transcribe. In this case, I've 3D printed it. And the other has a revolving drum. And they're revolving synchronously. So as one goes 360 degrees, so does the other. The pencil is held against the recording drum just by the weight of the motor. These are simple paper patterns printed on an ordinary sheet of paper, and these are some 3D printed versions of that I tried later to increase the accuracy. So to make this all work, I found simple patterns. The one I'm cutting out is a round 5-lobed flower type design. And the actual size doesn't matter, just that it has to fit on my input plate. And I would put it on with just some simple tape, making sure it was centered, of course. And I've located the support for the tracing stylus, which is a simple pointed piece of flat bar, at a convenient height to match the height of my hand while I was holding it. Similarly, I sized the output drum to hold a piece of paper that would fit in the pattern design window on a TV screen, and you'll see what I did with that. Initially, I had a plastic drum like this, but I subsequently changed to a wooden drum. I found that actually worked better with a pencil. I could have used a Sharpie or something like that, but a pencil was just as easy to use. And there's no other springs, it's just the weight of that little stepper motor on top of there. So the starting point is where the two pieces of paper intersect. So I'm just starting to trace a pattern, and I'll show you the input drum later. But you can see how things just slowly resolve, managing to get around corners. There's the starting point again. I wrote a very short macro to use in Gerbil Glue that allows me just to push a button and this starts turning. So I have it turning slowly so that it's a little easier to follow with the stylus on the input pattern, because sometimes there's very sharp corners and you have to move things quickly. And at the same time as this is rotating, then I'm following the pattern with the tip of this sharpened piece of flat bar. And it'll go around one complete rotation, as you see, and make its way back to the beginning. Because the control card is already pre-programmed with Gerbil, and I found this on AliExpress and then added a couple of stepper drivers, this was a very straightforward setup. I'll cut my paper pattern off. And with that off, I can go to the next step. There it is. It's not super pretty, but it works. So here it is being input, and I'm quite relaxed there. I can just have the tip follow that simple DXF pattern around, and it's at the corner changes here you have to move a little quicker. I printed 3D versions of this to try riding the edge of my pointed stylus along the 3D wall to see if I could get a little sharper design output, because even though I've got these input, they're still in need of some editing to try to get a correct output pattern. Not every input pattern is suitable for this kind of pattern point. So there's a version I did of a pear, and here's a six petal flower. So what I'll do is I'll put that on top put on top of that a sheet of clear acetate plastic. This used to be used in old overhead projectors, and it's the same size as an ordinary piece of paper. And I'll trace out that design just with a Sharpie. So now I have the same design traced out on a clear piece of plastic. I'll take that plastic and tape it over the pattern design window in Cornlathe that's come up on my computer monitor. Next, I take the cursor. I'll clear this current pattern. I'll give it a unique new name. I'll just call it test pattern. And I find that straight lines is the best choice for what kind of lines to do. The other ones were quite confusing. Now you can't see the pattern that's on the screen, but I can. So I take the cursor and I just double click over where the pattern lines are, following that design. Now this particular design was a bit too fine, too detailed, and it didn't work out very well. But to show you just what can be done, so right now I have butterfly selected. I'm going to go down and select my test pattern, and I don't want 3 instances of that, I only want 1. So I'll go back, select 1 there, and go to the outline window and drag that up just to the top, so I just see 1 like that. And you can see how muddy this one was. This was actually an attempt at a silhouette of a famous individual. At any rate, you can also mirror what you put in there. In this case, I wouldn't want to. And if you hit normalize, then it'll stretch it out from top to bottom. But sometimes you don't want to do that, because then you get to start all over again. So that's how I solve the problem of pattern point patterns. I hope this video has been helpful for you. Thank you for watching.